economic groups, racial groups, there are blacks, Jews, Protestants, Catholics, you name it.
Black, white, old, young, rich, poor, straight, gay, every possible type you can imagine. And I've worked in places like Brazil, Australia, Europe, working with abductees there. So it's a global phenomenon.
There are not enough words to describe the extreme emotions one may feel when coming in contact with extraterrestrial beings. There's a great deal of mystery and misunderstanding associated with this phenomenon due to partial or no recall in many abductees. However, top researchers like David Rubian have singled out a gentleman by the name of Jim Sparks, who has almost complete total recall. His abduction experiences have brought amazing insight into an otherwise speculative alien agenda.
Jim remembers more than any other individual I've come in contact with without the benefit of hypnosis. But his experiences not only are so vivid in what he's actually has gone through, but I can see that what he's telling is the truth.
The Jim Sparks story is one of the most significant in the human abduction syndrome because the majority of his experiences he had as an experience consciously.
The fact that Jim has had those recollections, and other people have had them too, and they seem reliable, they seem a pattern, of course adds credibility to Jim in general. And so I've had never a reason to doubt his credibility.
I think it's valuable that Jim Sparks has made a record in such detail of the information that's come to him, the language that he's taken down, the rapidity with which he notices that information comes to him in this process. And so it's very concrete and can be compared with what other people report, and again gives a certain authenticity and validity to it if we find that others are having the same experiences and putting down the same formulations and symbols, because it's not something somebody could really make up on their own.
There's an estimated hundreds of thousands or maybe even millions of people around the world who have abduction experiences that are fragmented, some with no conscious recall at all. Why are you one of the few that has almost 95% total recall?
Well, I feel it might be for several reasons, but one in particular is that I never went along with any agenda that they had in mind. One could say that I fought them tooth and nail.
You didn't cooperate with them at all?
No, particularly in the early years.
Was that harder on you in essence?
Much. I think it brought out I think the will or the fight against them brought out the ability for me to retain a lot of the things that were going on. Secondly, I believe that there are humans that, for whatever reason they pick them, they want to retain the memory or the experience of the abduction. I just happen to be one of those.
What is your emotional state when you come face to face with these beings?
Well, I've been dealing with them for 9 years now. The first several years, it was horrible.
How horrible?
Pure trauma. Well, for starters, you're somewhere that you don't want to be. That in itself is scary. I didn't want anything to do with this, period.
I would imagine it'd be hard to accept the fact that it's happening at all.
Oh, yeah. Well, getting into that, it's... Accepting it yourself is one thing. Explaining it to others is another.
Right.
The aliens themselves radiate an energy or vibration that paralyzes you. Fear, yeah, sure, you're paralyzed in fear, but it also paralyzes your mind and your body.
I know there's a lot of fear connected with it, and there certainly was in my life, but it's not a form of mental illness. It's not a progressive physical disease. We know those things because we're all still fine after years of having had it.
These experiences are complex, ambiguous. We have no control over them, and they're very, very difficult to deal with.
When you're abducted, how often does this occur, and what happens in the abduction process?
It happened quite often. Some cases 2, maybe 4 times a month. Here in the last few years, perhaps it's twice a year, maybe 2 or 3 times a year at the most.
Mm-hmm. And when you get abducted, how does that take place exactly?
Well, there's 2 ways in my experience that one goes. One way I call the easy way, which the worker beings escort you from your home, or in some cases your car, to their craft. One goes the easy way when the crafts are on the ground. I think one goes what I call the hard way when they're actually in flight or hovering over your home. The hard way involves typically I'm sleeping, and then I'll be woken up, and then I'll go back to sleep, sort of like a second sleep or an unnatural second sleep. But I'll be awakened to a low-pitched, low RPM whirling sound that sounds sort of like a whipping, whirling sound. I'll hear it in my head, and it'll get louder and louder and louder, tremendously loud. Then I would lose consciousness, and then the next thing, when I regained consciousness, the next thing I knew is I would be there.
So you're not aware of what happens between point A and point B?
Better than 99% of the time, no, you're not.
Evidence suggests that through advanced technology, our current laws of physics simply do not apply. It seems extraterrestrials have the ability to create a field which, among other things, renders invisibility and even interdimensional transport, whereas time seems to be manipulated at will. Aliens have even been seen walking through walls.
To me, it's like any other technology. For example, a television. It's probably the most simplest tool in the world for one to use. On, off, change the channels. However, if one were to tear it apart, if you weren't a technician to try and figure it out, it would be beyond comprehension. The same thing with their technology. They are advanced cultures. After all, they can come here. And to us, when we look at the technology, it seems extremely complicated, almost magical, as a matter of fact. To coin a phrase, their technology is so advanced it seems like magic. But however, after seeing it time and time and time and time again, and not being traumatized by it because of familiarity, I noticed that it's a field they create somehow, and it enables all these wondrous
So you become
things.
somehow acclimated to the field?
Yes, but you're always scared to death. Perhaps the trauma doesn't, or the fear doesn't last as long each time, but yeah, there's always an overwhelming fear at first, because it is completely unnatural.
According to Jim, their technology also allows them to literally be 80% in one dimension and work 20% in another. In some cases, that is why they can be seen as transparent. You can see right through them because 20% of their working essence is here and 80% may be somewhere else, or whatever number they choose, for example, 50-50, 90-10, etc.
Extraterrestrials, in a lot of cases, can be mistaken as spirits, demons, angels, and I think that's been going out through history.
What other activities are associated with being abducted?
Well, there seems to be, in almost every case that I'm aware of, poltergeist-type activities.
Why is that?
They literally go through dimensions in order to go from point A to point B. And what I've also learned in my experience is that there are other types of entities or things that exist in other dimensions that perhaps are spirits or ghosts. For all I know, it may even be humans.
Are you saying that they follow these beings through these dimensions when these holes or portals are opened up?
Yeah, I think doorways are opened up.
After your return, then, you hear noises.
You do,
so
or you can be
and
angry, or if your emotions are really strummed up, something can fall in a back room. Now, how does that tie in? I'm not sure, but I do know things like that go hand in hand during and after the use of extraterrestrial technology.
Most of the peoples of the earth, except the Western man of the past 200 or 300 years, has been aware of other intelligences that come from other dimensions and enter into our world. They were called spirits or divas or whatever, and they were accepted by other cultures. We've simply rid ourselves or destroyed the capability of perceiving this dimension of reality.
how do you communicate with them?